I'll react to this video.
Myself, if no one calling me beautiful, I said it myself. Yeah, cause it is time that we should face this. Doesn't matter if a man is born to two races. Equal rap, both races to the fullest. Haters saying other.
No. Anyway.
Otherwise, they evident.
Information on her father, but I'm assuming her father is of African descent. Adela James and her mother. She has a beautiful family. This is another picture of Adela James when she was a baby and her mother. I bring up the fact that Adela James is biracial or mixed race for a very particular reason. I have a YouTube channel of almost 12,000 people. And I love all my subscribers and thank you all for subscribing. And I asked a very pointed question. Are biracial people black? Only 11% said they are black. This is out of 2.3 thousand votes. 33% said not black. And 56% said they're not black, they're not white, they're both. They can claim both, but they're not really either. So the black community depicts us a certain way. They depict us biracials as not really black or not black enough, and they don't want biracial people representing them. So then I have to ask the question, why is Adela James suddenly black then? Or is she only black to certain members of the black community when it suits them? Biracial people or mixed race people, like everyone else, don't like to be used to suit someone else's agenda. It's very disheartening and confusing to be accepted as black one day and then next week you're not black enough.
No, I think more so the situation with that is if you follow some people like Jada Pinkett Smith and so forth, you mean to tell me you think that Viola Davis would represent Jada Pinkett Smith better than Adela would? Adela James? Most likely, Adela James would actually represent Jada Pinkett Smith way better than a Viola Davis. So, are we going to pretend with ourselves or just ignore the context? Because we're referencing people like Jada Pinkett Smith, and many of the people speaking in the documentary and so forth were people who had a phenotype whiter than Adela James, who may have claimed that they're black, but they still had a whiter phenotype than her. And so it wouldn't be a shock that they would identify her phenotype with their phenotype. With acting, it's not about your culture, because you are playing a role and you are filling it in with your phenotype, not your actual personality you are putting on an act.
But now let's get into the meat and bones of this conversation. Do I think Cleopatra, the actual Queen Cleopatra, because there were several of them, but the last one, do I think she was black? Well, yes and no. But before I get to that, let's break down some other factors.
The reality is that Cleopatra, she was the last member of this dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, which went all the way back to the death of Alexander the Great and the division of Alexander's empire among his Macedonian generals. So the result of that was a Greek dynasty was established based in Alexandria. And they, by and large, I mean, there's very little evidence that they ever married anybody who wasn't also Greek. Indeed, sometimes brothers and sisters married, which was an Egyptian practice, one that the Greeks actually detested. So really, all the evidence we have, including also the visual evidence, because there are quite a lot of portraits which are thought to be of Cleopatra, we can't always be sure, show her looking very, very Greek. And all her predecessors, apart from herself, none of them even spoke the Egyptian language.
Now, I personally don't think Cleopatra looked like that Macedonian Greek lady, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But first, let's debunk this whole theory that all of Africa has always been black. Are there black-skinned African tribes that are in North Africa? 100%, hell yeah there are. But does that mean the majority?
Just like saying that, are there white-skinned people? in America, and if there are, that means they are Native American. White Americans are not Native American any more than black people are native to North Africa. That's just the truth. And I'm not just making that up. You can look up any North African country you like, and you will find that there are no sub-Saharan black African people that are actually native to North Africa at all. There are some Berber, or as that's what they sometimes call them, descended individuals who are from certain tribes that maybe have mixed ancestry, but this is usually more into the southern, more Saharan regions, not particularly the conventional thought of where North Africa is, like Egypt, for example. This is why originally they had racial subsets for the Caucasian race, and the subsets specifically included the Hamitic race, and the Hamitic subset specifically included North Africans of the Berber tribe, basically, populations, and descendants of that specific tribe, basically. But also, not just that, it also included people who were from that background, but were not specifically only of that racial background, so they could be mixed too. But those people, like I said, come from more of the southern regions of the Sahara, not specifically like Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, so forth. So, yeah, that's my whole point in this, is that, it's not specifically that just because black people have moved to North Africa does not make them black people who are native to North Africa any more than it makes white Americans native to North America, White Americans are not native to America. No matter how long white Americans live in America, that doesn't change that white Americans are not Native American, just like black sub-Saharan African people are not native to sub-Saharan Africa, and no matter what, they will not be native to North Africa.
Of North Africa has always been black.
Go ahead.
This person asks a very interesting question that a lot of people wonder. How come North Africa looks Arab and not black? So first, we need to clarify that North Africa is very diverse.
North Africa is largely not Arab. It's only ignorant people that call North Africans Arab. Anyway, continue.
And there are tons of ethnicities that would be considered black in much of the world, and then some would be considered white or Arab. So it's very diverse, but you're right. Much of North Africa is more Arab-leaning compared to the rest of Africa, but why? So, contrary to popular belief, most North Africans are not Arab, and that's why a lot of us will correct you if you call us Arab.
Exactly.
People often assume that we're Arab because we're Muslims, speak Arabic, and then a lot of us do look similar to Arabians, and so they assume, oh, it had to do with conquerings, but that's actually not why we look similar. For example, this is an ancient Egyptian depiction of a Libyan, and this is way before the Arab expansion. So, what's the answer? Ancient human migration patterns. Basically, you know how all humans originated in Africa and then many of us left and then we developed different features like our skin color? Well, there's actually migrations back into Africa that happened after that. If you're wondering how far back this goes, we're talking about like more than 10,000 years ago, like really long time ago, early humans. And a lot of the people of Arabia, North Africa, and East Africa share those same ancestors, like Natufians.
He touched on human migration. And we all know that everyone started in Africa, that Africa is the cradle of humanity. And according to the out of Africa theory, human beings migrated in all directions. And we all know that around the equator is hotter. And we know humans, like all things, evolved to the climate they're in. And the equator cuts right through Africa, right through West and East Africa. And again, the temperatures by the equator are a lot hotter. And people along the equator are darker and have other features to adjust to that heat, as right here. So this also explains why a lot of North Africans are different shades than the rest of Africa. North Africa is farther away from the equator. And you can see with the people in Europe and Asia and even the Middle East, there's various skin tones. But for the most part, it's lighter. Let's go back to that brother one more time because he has more to say.
And also, those in Southern Europe, Middle East, West Asia, and North Africa tend to have similar skin tone ranges as well. That's just something I wanted to point out.
And we were never black to begin with. I'm fully Coptic Egyptian, and it's been proven that we're not black-blooded at it. I see this comment a lot. Some of you are very confused on the difference between race and ethnicity, and I don't hold it against you. Bro, you are 100% right. The Egyptians that exist today, especially Coptics, are pretty much the exact same Egyptians that existed 5,000 years ago. Same thing. That's not up for debate. We have genetic evidence, historical evidence, linguistic evidence. That's not debatable. But that's ethnicity. Ethnicity can be proven through linguistic, historical, genetic evidence often. But race is not scientific or historical at all. It is purely identity politics. I find it funny when I show people this image, right? This is taken in South Egypt. People say, oh, they're Arab. But if I show people this exact same image and say, oh, this was taken in Eritrea or Sudan, people start to change their tune. Oh, they're not Arab, they're African. Oh, no, they're black. No, they're East African. That's different. All of you are very wrong and very right. These people are ethnically Saidi Egyptian.
First off, I wanted to say race was not defined by genetics, no, but race can be defined by cranial structure. So that's what it was always defined by, which would imply these individuals would actually fall under more of the caucasoidal structure than, say, someone who is of a congoid cranial structure, a sub-Saharan African cranial structure. So yeah, race is real. I don't understand why people act like you can't acknowledge that. It is real. There are differences that we all have, and our differences are all beautiful, but yeah. Anyway, continue.
That's it. If this guy says, oh, I'm Arab, then he's Arab. That's it. If this guy says, oh, I'm black, then he's black. That's it. That's all this is. It's an identity thing. It's who you identify.
No, it's not about identity, because if it was about identity, black people could just identify as white. That would happen. And Asians could identify as black. And white people could identify as Aborigines. You get what I'm saying? That's not the way it works. It's based off of how you look, basically. And it's not based off of skin tone per se, because people always say, oh, it has to do with your skin tone. It's not really, because if that was the case, then Asians, Aborigines, black people, and Hispanic people who are of native descent would all be read as the same race, right? Even some Middle Eastern and North African people would be read the same race when they tan. We'd have some Italians being read the same race as black people in the summertime because they get darker. It's not because of skin tone, specifically because of your cranial structure. If you have a cranial structure that is similar to a black person, therefore you are read as a black person by society, and therefore you will be identified as a black person. If you have a cranial structure like an Asian person, then you are read as an Asian person. That's how it works. I know a lot of people hate acknowledging the cranial structural differences, as if there's something wrong acknowledging the differences. It goes along with the idea that having black cranial structure is a bad thing, which adds on to the stigma. If you just embrace it, you remove the stigma instead of running from it and pretending it's not there. Anyway, continue.
Who's your tribe? How do you digest these words? You cannot scientifically prove someone's race because it's not science at all. You can scientifically prove someone's ethnicity, but...
And to piggyback off that, if you ask most Egyptians what their race is, they'll tell you that they're Egyptian. Some will say they're Arabs. Some will say they're Nubians. But most will just say they're Egyptian. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, especially for a lot of Westerners. where the idea of race is everything and occupies every level of society. Well, the Western version of race is not accepted everywhere. And when we're having these discussions, that's something you have to keep in mind. Now I feel I talked y'all head off long enough. Let's get to the meat and bones of this. Was Cleopatra...
But if Egyptians are black to some extent, then wouldn't you be black, not biracial? It's really weird that you don't want to admit that you want to perceive Egyptians as another race, yet you are willing to say they're not black, which kind of implies that you are black, because if your mother is Egyptian and that's the reason you are biracial, but your father is black, and you're saying Egyptians are basically black, then you are black. Anyway, continue.
A black woman. I said yes and no. A lot of black people in my life and online, and even recently in that poll, made it clear that biracial people are not black. Biracial people are both. They're not one or the other, but they're both. Again, this gets into race politics. But there's been evidence that arsenic has African bone structure. And we all know that the bone structure of an African, of a Caucasian, and of an Asian are different. And
Okay, 3 different things I want to say here. One, let's head to the part about Arsenal. For one, Arsenal has a whole situation where Arsenal is a half-sister of Cleopatra, so specifically they probably did not have the same mother. Secondarily, Arsenal having African features or whatever, skeletal structure, you could say, oh, maybe that means something. It would mean something, maybe. If her face wasn't reconstructed, because her face was reconstructed with the analysis. So this isn't just her natural cranial structure. This is with guessing. Now, also the other thing is they cannot actually properly identify her because they cannot do DNA testing. So they are not even sure it is actually Arsenal. Also, on top of that, there are 2 things you are admitting here. One, that Africans are racially different from Caucasians. So Africans have a different cranial structure than Caucasians. And if you look African, then you are a different race from Caucasians. So you're a black person, you're trying to imply, if you are African. Well, the thing is about that is, well, if her mother was, and this is just talking about Arsenal, because I've already addressed, or whoever that person was, for that matter, I've already addressed this wouldn't have much to do with Cleopatra because they most likely were half siblings and did not have the same mother. But the main thing I wanted to address was it sheds light on you because you are specifically implying that to be African, you are black. If you look African, you look black. You look different from Caucasians. Where is Egypt? What is an Egyptian? Egypt is in Africa, sweetie. Egyptian is African, okay? So these are true things that are obvious. If you look at a map, Egypt is in Africa, and Egyptians are African. So you are saying, and you are implying that Egyptians are not Caucasians. Egyptians are African. Egyptians are basically black. And Egyptians are African. So looking Egyptian would be looking African. Having cranial structure like an Egyptian is African cranial structure. So wouldn't that basically mean that you specifically do not see Egyptians as anything but black, basically? That's what you're portraying Egyptians to be. By saying African is a race, you're including Egyptians because Egypt is in Africa and Egyptians are African. So why am I pressing upon this? Because this guy is a man who is half Egyptian, and he is saying that he is half Egyptian, and that makes him biracial. That's why he keeps trying to say he's biracial, is because he's half Egyptian. Now, you would say, oh, is he half Egyptian, half white? No. This man is half Egyptian, half black. Okay, if you're half Egyptian and half black, and you just depicted Africans as a race, you depicted Africa and having African cranial structure and being an African as one race, and that implies that Egyptians are black because they are African. They are in Africa. So your mother, who is Egyptian, was an African woman. That is without dispute. Your mother was an African woman. Your mother was born in Africa. Your mother is from Africa because she's from Egypt. You're implying that there's one African race. So then the Egyptians are black. Therefore, your mother would be black, right? And your father, who is black American, well, obviously is black. Then where does the biracial come in? I'm not saying you're not biracial, because I have a different view on this. I do not see Egyptians as black. I don't see North Africans as black, because historically they never were labeled black people. They were labeled under the Caucasian category, the Hamitic Caucasian category. Yes, there has always been a distinguished population that has always been considered Caucasian that was native to Africa. And those were North Africans who were of Berber descent and of North African descent specifically. Basically the natives of North Africa. So if that's the case, I'm not specifically saying you're not biracial. You are saying you're not biracial. So you try and call yourself biracial, but on the basis of what? If Cleopatra's sister was half black because her mother was African, presumably Egyptian, as I read the article he's talking about. It specifically said her mother was Egyptian, like indigenous Egyptian, and he specifically says his mother's father is indigenous Egyptian, 100%. So he's saying that his mother's father was a black man if Cleopatra's supposed half-sister's mother was indigenous Egyptian and she was black. You can't have this two ways. You guys are the same thing. You're trying to say that you're mixed and she's biracial. It's just because you're trying to claim her.
Scipio, I think is how you say it, Cleopatra's sister, had African bone structure, which means she had an African mother. And if Cleopatra and Arsenio, I can't pronounce her name, both had the same mother, an African mother, and a Macedonian Greek father, that makes Cleopatra biracial, or mixed race, or whoever you want to say. And the cat.
That's not true, because they don't even have the same mother. But like I said, it's not even proven that was Arsenal is her name. It wasn't even proven that was Arsenal. And even if it was, it's not saying that she was sub-Saharan African. It's saying she was half Egyptian and that she was African in that regard. So, yeah, like I said, you're only erasing yourself as biracial at this point. You're not even addressing Cleopatra as much as you wanted to try to claim her. And the acrobatics you guys do to try to claim you're black, claim she's black or biracial or whatever, it's crazy to me. It really is. because it's like, she's not that special. She's just some random lady. I have Egyptian ancestry myself. I'm not trying to run and claim this lady. I don't understand why you guys need to do so many acrobatics to try and prove that she's biracial, to try to prove she's black, to try to prove she's white. To me, it's quite obvious the lady was white. Even if she has Egyptian ancestry in her, Egyptians aren't black. So it doesn't really change anything. Even if she was 3/4 Egyptian, it wouldn't change. It wouldn't make her a black person because Egyptians aren't black people.
This thing of a biracial woman, I feel was 100% correct. I'm probably going to get hate on all sides for this, because we as biracials not really accepted anywhere. And again, this goes into identity politics. I believe the last queen, Cleopatra, was of mixed race, biracial. African mother and Macedonian Greek father. So by today's Black American identity politics, Cleopatra wasn't a black woman. Adela James isn't a black woman. Barack Obama isn't a black man.
So, for one, trying to say that you believe, I don't really think you believe that she's black and white. I think that you want her to be black and white, so then you can somehow have some kind of identity similarity with her. But you wouldn't even be doing that because you're literally saying she's Egyptian and white, European, right? So you're saying Egyptian is black. If you're Egyptian, black, and black American, you wouldn't be biracial. She would be biracial, and so you'd just be erasing yourself. I don't understand how he didn't make any acknowledgement or understanding that he just basically erased himself from being biracial. Out of this whole conversation, he was not able to be self-conscious of what he was actually saying about himself. You have a whole channel saying AngryBiracial, but somehow you just tried to make the part of you that was proving that you were biracial to be black. So you made yourself out to be a fully black man, all in efforts to make Cleopatra half black, and you even failed at that. At the end of the day, even if we were to give that any credence, it would only mean Arsenal was biracial. If we were going to call Egyptians black. After all that, you got rid of your own biracial identity. You tried to basically do all these acrobatics just to make her half sister biracial. And I still don't even agree with that. You still haven't proven that Cleopatra was even half Egyptian after all of that. But to me, it's just interesting because it's like, if you don't feel biracial and you identify as black and you think that Egyptians are black, then why are you saying that your name is AngryBiracial? Make it consistent. I do not make acrobatics like this. I do not. I never try and say North Africans are black to meet any type of argument or any claim that I need to try and claim because, I want so badly to claim a historic figure in Egypt. I just don't have time to do that. I'd rather deal with the reality. It's not going to change anything. I mean, Cleopatra is dead in the ground somewhere. And she's as white as can be, regardless of how many times people lie and try and make up that Egyptians are black, try and make up that her mother was Egyptian, try to make up all this stuff. She's still going to be as white as she was ever. She's always going to be white. And it's just like, to me, it's a desperate move to be trying to claim this lady. What's so important about her anyway? I don't get it. She's just some random lady in history, like everybody else. Like, please, stop trying to be so desperate to claim her. Let her be white in peace. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe, comment down below, and have a great day. Bye, guys.